the Chamber this week, we're talking about communicating with the dead, extreme city building, finding the courage to go on the other side of the screen, and revisiting an old classic with super cool sunglasses. And you know, we're wacky guys. Who knows what crazy things we'll fix up? All this and more on Fandom Roulette. Hey everyone, welcome to Fandom Roulette. This is Joe.
And I'm Cody.
Hi Cody, how are you doing this week?
I'm lovely. How are you doing?
Oh, you know, it's fun. It's a fun times in my life.
You don't.
It's going to be one of those episodes, I think.
Oh no!
Oh yeah. So anyway, Cody, what nerdy stuff have you been up to?
Well, I'll tell you what. Like usual.
Yeah.
It's probably going to come up in the video game section.
Oh, man.
Yeah, no surprises here.
I'm surprised.
But other than that, a lot of DM prepping.
Okay.
I'm finding that my groups are moving faster than my notes have let me believe they would move at.
Yeah, trust me, that's true for me as well. I did not realize we were going to move that quickly, so...
Yeah, we're going to have to talk about that at some point.
Like here or in general?
In general, maybe a bonus app. You know, who knows?
Who knows?
So what crazy, wacky shenanigans have you been up to?
I've reading books. That's one of the things that I do.
What?
Yeah, no, I've been reading.
You read?
I do read. I finished this book called The Last Dragon Lord, which had like weird dragons in it. And then I started reading a new book called The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, who, this book won the Hugo Award in, 2016, I want to say. And then the sequel won the Hugo Award in 2017. So, sounds like they're pretty good. And then, of course, I've been watching stuff as it comes out. So I've been watching, Season 2 of Westworld. I've been watching other things. I've been catching up on shows that I like Bob's Burgers and Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So when I have free time, I watch stuff. So yeah.
So were you a little nervous when Brooklyn Nine-Nine for a hot second got canceled?
Yes. I was pretty scared because it's a show that is my go-to. I watch it to cheer myself up. And I think it's
nice.
One of the smartest. I think it's one there are shows that are really, really creative with their dialogue, and there are shows that are really, really creative with their visuals. And then that show is able to do both really effectively, which I think is pretty great. So
very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. But yeah, so we're here again on this.
It is
the time we normally do it, which is Wednesday evening. I'm observing that perfect light, that it's magic hour, baby, for podcasting. Ooh, that,
yeah.
You know, when the light just hits everything just so nice, and for this audio medium that we call podcasting.
Yeah, I mean, my room is pitch black besides the monitor screen, so I don't know, I'm kind of a cave dweller.
Don't brag there, Cody.
Dude,
Artemis Fowl over here.
I'm gonna brag about it all day.
That was a deep cut for one of my favorite book series is from the 90s, late 90s, no 2000s. Man, what did that book come? Anyways,
yeah, that went way over my head.
Yeah, he was this genius little kid who was able to trick a leprechaun into doing what he wanted because he stole her gold. So
damn.
And you find out that that all fake creatures, leprechauns and stuff, they're all from this underground world. And my favorite little joke about it is that leprechauns are actually this elite crime fighting force called Lep Recon.
I get it.
Good joke. It's a good joke.
I feel like I've heard this before.
I might have said it on this podcast, but I think I've not.
But it's good.
I've not been shy about the fact that I am very much like a goldfish, and once I'm done, once I hit the stop button on these things, I have no idea what I say on this program. So yeah,
well, round 2 is just as good.
Literally, I could probably just talk about pirates every week, and I'm sure everyone else would notice, but I would not notice at all.
Yes.
I just roll
I
right
mean,
on.
I wouldn't hate it either. I like your talks on
I know
pirates.
that's like my bread and butter. So
Ya boy.
yeah. So anyways, speaking of pirates, which were a thing in the past, my God, it's the history section. What?
Oh boy, I had no
Yeah, I
idea.
know. It's not like we follow a pattern or anything, right?
Not
Nope,
at all.
not even close
So
to a pattern.
what little nugget of wisdom can you give me today?
Uh,
Am I gonna learn about the underwater?
the underwater, like
Yeah, like Atlantis.
oh yeah. Oh my God, what was I? I was watching. This is relevant, I promise. Um, I was watching a very funny show called Travel Man, which stars the British comedian Richard Iowata and another British comedian going around to different cities. And the premise of it is that Richard Iowata's whole like persona character thing is that he hates traveling. And
Wait, what?
yeah, he's like a very nebbish British guy. He actually played Dean Lerner on Dark Place. Um, everyone should
Oh,
watch
yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Everyone should watch Dark Place, by the way. This is like a little aside, which is great. This is the fastest aside we've ever gotten to. And like it's not I didn't even get into my history section yet. But anyways, uh Richard he's also famous from the IT crowd. But he had a joke where he went to Venice and the joke was Venice is the Atlantis that it's okay to believe in, which I thought was a pretty
Nice.
funny joke. So
That's
anyways,
a good one.
aside. So we're going to be talking a little bit about spiritualism and seances because I mentioned it in the podcast apparently, and I guess it must have just stuck up in the craw because I was like, I want to learn some more about this and talk about it with my friend Cody and the good people at home. Um,
Oh god.
so anyways, spiritualism was a new religious movement that was based on the belief that the spirits of the dead exist and have both the ability and inclination to communicate with the living. And so this was incredibly popular from the 1840s to the 1920s, and mainly in uh, English speaking countries. And so by 1897, spiritualism was said to have more than 8 million followers, um, which, and this is the part that's rather interesting to me, really came from like the upper middle class and like the upper class specifically. And another kind of crazy thing about it is there's no, unlike a lot of other like religious traditions and things like that, there was no like sent like canonical texts or things like that. Mainly, this information was passed around by periodicals, tours by lecturers, meetings of different groups that would be called camp meetings, and the activities of accomplished mediums, which were people who said they had the ability to commune with the dead. Um, and so some famous spiritualists through history um, are going to include. Uh, so the arguably the most famous one was Mary Todd Lincoln, who was the president President Lincoln's wife. Um, there were other people um, who, for instance, oh God, what's his name? Arthur Conan Doyle was a prominent spiritualist, and other people, other historical names. And every city almost always had like an occult group in them. This was kind of a growing trend among these people, and it was kind of this marriage of this idea that we have spirits and things like that, and that there was an all-powerful creator, although it's not necessarily following any theoretically like Christian dogmas or things like that. Um, and so there was a list of principles which kind of came about between 1899 and 1944, which have some ideas such as a belief in an infinite intelligence. The phenomenon of nature, both physical and spiritual, are the expression of this infinite intelligence. the existence of personal identity and of the individual continue after the change called death. And one of the biggest ones is that the doorway to reformation is never closed against any soul here or hereafter. But like a lot of things, spiritualism was, something that kind of grew in its own little weird things. And I think the biggest one, and the one that most people are familiar with, is this idea of something called seances. So have you ever heard of a seance before, Cody?
Yeah, you gotta hold hands and close eyes and say things and ghosts show up.
Yes, sir.
Wasn't the Ouija board kind of loosely based on that idea? Or that concept?
It is actually loosely based on that concept.
Yes, I knew a thing.
Yeah, it's this idea like channeling powers together will allow us the ability to commune with the dead, and so it really comes from just the French word for session or to sit. And in France, this term is quite general. So, for instance, you might say the phrase "une séance de cinéma," which means a movie session. So, if you're, or a theater séance, so just an assembly of people, things like that. But in English, it has come to mean primarily meeting of people who are gathered to receive messages from ghosts. And so, the first example we see of communications comes from a book in the 1760s called Communication with the Other Side by George, the first Baron Littleton. And according to
he was really creative with the title.
I know, right? And so some of the people he claimed to talk to were Peter the Great, Pericles, William Penn, and a Queen of Sweden. And so, these were things that were kind of slowly but surely growing in popularity. And like I said, once sort of spiritualism started coming about, it really reached its heyday. And one of the most famous seances that we know about is actually one that Mary Todd Lincoln hosted in the middle of the White House. So
Neat.
They had one of these in the White House. And, Abe showed up. But in 1887, there was a commission called the Seybird Commission, which marred the credibility of spiritualism at the height of its popularity by exposing the fraud and showmanship of some seance leaders. So, as you said, when you do a seance, people get together, they hold hands, and they, kind of channel these spirits. And there's lots of stuff you can look up about this to talk about this. But one of the things about seances and mediums in general is they use these little clues and ticks to kind of help you along the pathway to what you ultimately think are going to happen. So the big joke is, they'll stand up there and they'll be like, I'm thinking of the letter A, B, C, D, and then someone's like, oh, D, David, things like that. But it was a little bit more subtle than this. So, oh, I'm seeing a color and the color is red. Cody, does the color red make you think of anything?
It makes me think of the color red.
Well, thanks for playing along, Cody.
Wah, wah.
I really But they would ask these kind of...
No, I'll play along.
They would ask
the color red reminds me of apples.
And did you enjoy eating apples with anyone in particular?
Yes, my beloved werewolf companion.
Oh,
Clark.
And is your beloved werewolf companion Clark still with us?
No, he unfortunately was attacked by werewolf hunters.
This is. Oh, I'm seeing a thing. I'm seeing low ratings for this episode. Oh goodness.
Damn. Oh no. What have we done?
I see a review. The top comment is bad bit, Cody.
Oh, okay. I get the bad bit this time. Well, I'm gonna rip cord out of this shit. Woo!
But anyways, so that was one of the main ones. Was they would ask leading questions that would ultimately make you come to the realization that someone was talking to you from beyond. And this is not to cast aspersions on mediums or things like that, but there are well proven kind of tropes and things like that. And then the other kind of interesting thing is if you learn about the sort of ways that these people were able to kind of pull things off, it's actually rather impressive. So in many ways, it is kind of similar to magic, which coincidentally also made a kind of its heyday during this time period. Stage magic. So have you ever seen the movie The Prestige?
Yeah.
Yeah, that it's a lot of these things were kind of coming about at the same time. But so there were some tools that were used in seances. One of them was just the fact that they were often held in darkened rooms. So it allowed for you to hide things better, so hide wires or other tools, things like that. One of the main things was something called spirit trumpets, which were horn-shaped speaking tubes that were said to magnify the whispered voices of spirit to audible ranges, but it could have simply just been like a person in the back whispering into the pipe, and then it would magnify the voice. Another big one was spirit cabinets, which were portable closets where you could place a medium, um, but you could rig up things to make them rock and rattle and things like that. And then, of course, the seance table, which was a special lightweight table which could rotate, float, or levitate. But, chances are it was wires and things like that. But I want to tell a couple of quick stories about people from the Cleveland area, one a well-known historical figure that were big proponents of the seance or the spiritualism movement. One of them was
Yeah.
a man named his it was Benjamin Wade's father, who I believe was also named Benjamin Wade. But Benjamin Wade was a prominent Clevelander um, who donated quite a lot of money to found the Cleveland Museum of Art. And his father was a wealthy. He had his hand in a lot of different businesses, but he was quite wealthy. And much like a lot of people who lived in Cleveland, or wealthy people who lived in Cleveland, he had a house along Millionaire's Row. And so, unfortunately, a lot of those houses no longer exist, if only because they show an example of a radically different time. And so, in some cases, this was for really just nasty reasons. Rockefeller tore down a mansion because he didn't want it to be used for public housing eventually. But Wade tore down his house because he was afraid that his ghost was going to haunt a house at a place where he didn't know anyone, and that made him very sad. Oh.
I am now sad
And then
by
the
association.
other one was, of course, Mary Todd Lincoln, who, she and Abraham, people after Abraham died and after the loss of a son, there were some people who took advantage of her fragility and things like that, taking advantage of new photography exposures to kind of trick her into thinking that they could commune with the dead and things like that. So, yeah, it's not the happiest thing in the entire world, which is, I guess, like just the trend of the history section. I might move over to something more fun, I think. Maybe. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Everyone loves the history section. But yeah.
It's so good.
So anyway, do you have any questions for me? And then, of course, so it created this big kind of conflict. So one of the main people on the sort of anti-spiritualism side of things was Harry Houdini, and to the point where he and another stage magician named John Neville Mescaline actually started exposing fraudulent mediums, mainly because these were professional stage magicians, so they probably were aware of the tricks that were happening. And I think that it still exists today in varying degrees. So, like you mentioned, we still have Ouija boards. Although now the Ouija board is marketed as more of a novelty and a toy, and I think we just still like the concept of the seances. I think a lot of people now find them more fun uh, especially because of the fact that we have these examples of how they were falsified, and then of course we still have like professional fortune tellers and things like that, palm readings and all these things, all of which have their roots in the spiritualist movement. So now, do you have
Very
any
cool.
questions for me?
I
Oh
do, but
boy.
I'm gonna start
Cool,
with
cool. Let's do it.
this reminded me of a Hulu show called Shut Eye.
Okay.
Have you heard of
I have
that?
not heard of this, but I have Hulu now,
Um,
so.
it, it is it's starred by Jeffrey Donovan,
Okay.
which if you're familiar with the name, he did oh fuck, I'm blanking on the other show that he did, Burn Notice. If you know that
I
one.
do know that one.
Yeah, so he stars in this one where he plays a scam artist who basically runs a kind of fake psychic shop
Okay.
with his wife, and he's kind of there's kind of like a whole like crime family and all that
Sure, sure,
nonsense.
sure.
But it's super good. I like it a lot. Although some people might not. After I searched it up because I was like, shit, I can't remember the exact name of the title because I always just thought of the eye and it's saved on my Hulu.
Uh-huh.
And I was looking at some of the reviews, and Hulu really likes it.
Okay.
Obviously,
Sure, sure, sure.
IMDb, 7.4, not super great,
Alright.
but it's above. It's in the C range.
Sure,
It's an
sure, sure.
average TV show. Then Metacritic gave it a 50%, and I was like, oh no. um, but I really like the show. It's kind of
Sure.
it's silly and it kind of fits that.
Guilty
I
pleasure.
feel like yeah, and it's like they basically kind of show you like a little sneak peeks, kind of like they did in Bird Notice, but like basically how to basically scam people.
Uh-huh.
Not in any way that could be super useful, but like you get to see it in action, and it's entertaining enough. I
Uh-huh.
think it's worth a watch if that's what if this interested you at all.
Yeah, that sounds really
But
cool.
then my second question, which might get a little more deep, I guess, is do you what are your thoughts on say? I mean, I know there's like a lot of people that are have been proven that a lot of people were faking it. However, do you think there's someone out there who's doing some real seances and like really talking with the dead and all that?
I mean, I'll never say never, because that's the time when I'll get proven 100% unequivocally wrong. I mean, I just think, reading about the spiritualist movement. There's some more stuff I'd like to do before I like come back and present it again. There are some interesting aspects of it. I think it came about during a particularly interesting time in history. A lot of the leaders of the spiritualist movement happened to be women who were also heavily involved in like the abolitionist movement and the early women's rights movement. So that's quite admirable. Um, and I think that their heart was in the right place, but as with a lot of things, it was something that could be taken advantage of. So that's kind of my take on it.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
So yeah, but that's history. What up, what up, what?
Oh my god.
So
Well,
what about those games though? Cody, I heard about this thing.
well,
Can I ask you a question about it?
yeah,
So
yeah. Go ahead. What's
so
up?
you're like okay, you're you're like a you're like a circle, okay, and
Okay.
and you're rolling around and you're eating these little white pellets, and then there are these like ghosts that follows you around. What's up with that, Cody?
Oh, that would be a video
No one
game.
told me.
That's
Do all the video games have spooky ghosts in them, Cody?
not all hashtag not all
No,
video games
this one
have spooky ghosts
this
in
one had
them.
4 spooky ghosts, Cody, and that was far too spooky
Oh,
for the
wait,
likes
I'm
of
having
me.
I can see into the afterlife.
Oh no, Cody.
They were yellow,
Uh
pink,
huh.
red, and
Yeah,
blue.
and they had names too.
Yeah, I know. The only one I remember is Pinky.
Oh, see, it's weird. The only one I remember is Clyde because it didn't follow the naming conventions, and as a child, I thought that was
Yeah, because all of them.
hilarious. Oh,
Yeah, because they all had INKY as the end
it
of
was
their
like
name, except for Clyde.
Inky, Blinky, Pinky, and Clyde. I want to say
That checks.
it's a Pac-Man deep cut right there.
Ooh, yeah,
Yeah.
so deep.
Yep.
No one's gonna know what we're talking about anymore.
I think they're gonna
um,
know.
yeah, I feel like Pac-Man's too big
Yeah, that's
to
true.
ever become too obscure.
Hey Cody, I was playing this game. It was a really hard game, and you were a little angel boy. Oh wait, no, Kid Icarus got big because of Smash Brothers, huh?
Um, I mean,
I mean, people at least
kind
know who
of.
Pit is, so
Yeah, I mean, Kid Icarus was a brutally hard game,
uh-huh.
but I think his popularity, at least for most people, I'm not gonna say everybody, but
Uh-huh.
that was a revitalization of the old NES game Kid Icarus was Smash Brothers.
Yep. All right. So, anyways, now that that little
Yeah,
aside was done,
long tangent. This is not the games we're talking about today.
uh-huh.
Terry, Terry's been giving me a bunch of games lately.
Uh-huh.
He's he's hoping that one day I'll praise him so much that he'll ascend to new levels of video game creation. And this game for this week is Frostpunk.
Ooh,
Yeah, so it was
nice.
made by 11-bit Studios. Made it. It's for PC, Microsoft Windows. It came out the 24th of April, so a little bit ago. But so many games came out at the end of April that it was so hard to just pick one game to talk about weekly.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it is a city building survival game set in the kind of post apocalyptic winter hellhole that the earth, like, those alternate apocalypse scenarios where the entire earth becomes a frozen wasteland.
Okay, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, and you are the leader of this expedition who fled the cold and hungry areas of London and seeked to, survive with this kind of ridiculous like coal burner. And the general concept is basically you lead these people, so you're tasked with building shelters, providing food, getting resources, and I think you put it aptly. It is SimCity on a timer because it seems like, at least from my I've been playing this for a couple days now,
Uh-huh.
over the weekend,
Okay.
and it always feels like you never have enough people to do what you want to do. Your resources are always depleting,
Sure.
and you never you're always looking for more.
Huh.
And this game's pretty brutal. I have it set on normal, and I think the general idea, at least from what I'm gathering, is that you eventually get to a point where you're just you're going to kind of default lose. Like, I don't think there's a situation where you ever kind of get out of the shitter with like resources and like what the people want, because the game starts off and sure enough you have this like, and this is kind of interesting, they basically, in this post-apocalypse setting, they created these basically giant towers that burn coal to basically heat people up,
Okay.
keep them warm. And so your building structure is circular. Like, you kind of always build around the center of that like coal stack. And so one of the big things that they start you off with is people need to build homes and people need to be warm, because if they're not warm, they die, and then you lose. And that's kind of the general consensus, is if you don't have a certain thing, you're going to die eventually.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, and I think they do a really good job, at least this game does a really good job at kind of starting small and working its way up. So it's not just like, by the way, here's 17 resources you need to watch out for. Everyone's mad at you. Go have fun. Um,
Fun.
yeah. No, they start off and it's like, all right, people want a home. So you're like, all right, I'll go. I'll have the workers go out and collect, wood for the lumber that they need, and then coal for the heating. Because if you run out of coal, the generator stops working and everyone dies. So coal is like the biggest resource that you need to like continuously gather because eventually you're gonna run out of coal. Um,
Oh, fun.
so you build the homes,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Pretty easy. Build homes, gather resources. Pretty simple, straightforward. Then they're like, oh, well, now the people need food. So then you realize, oh, I need to build a little hut for people to go out and kind of hunt like wild animals that have managed to survive, or I need to build like places that can convert that raw meat into food.
That'd be ideal, I think.
Yeah, right? So you have X amount of people, and you're like, all right, I've sent a bunch of people to gather resources, and then it's like, okay, now I need to send people to get food, and then some people to convert that raw food into like something, edible.
Uh-huh.
Then they're like, oh, now people are getting sick because it's the winter time. You're always kind of getting sick in the winter. At least for me, I was pretty much permanently sick from November to
I
February
can confirm
or
this.
March. Yes, I was dying the whole time. So, like in this game, I was one of those people, and people are always getting sick. So then they introduce, okay, well you need a little doctor's place, and so slowly and slowly they start building the needs and necessities. And let me tell you what I. So, like I said before, the game kind of makes you feel like there's not really like an end, like congratulations you beat the game. It's congratulations you lived this long, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So my first playthrough, I made it to day 5. Everyone died. I was terrible. I am not a good post-apocalypse leader, unfortunately. However, I learned a couple cool things. So then I go through my second playthrough. I get to day 10 and I'm like, I'm starting to get the hang of this. And finally, third game, I got to day 30,
Nice.
which is pretty cool. And to give you context, I think like 10 days is kind of the equivalent of a couple hours of playing. So, I made it pretty far.
Nice.
And so there's like scenarios. So the first one is these group of people from London go off to kind of make their own. Then there's a second scenario, and they kind of give you some challenges. The first one being you have a lot of workers, but you don't have a lot of materials, and you have to keep like figuring out like, oh, I need more resources. Where can I get more resources? And then the second little story mission. And basically, the goal in the story missions, like, play as long as you want, but, like, if you get to day 20, you unlock the next scenario.
Oh, cool. That's fun.
So, the second one was, all right, you have 50 people total, but you have abundance of resources. How are you going to gather all that, and how are you going to, like, deal with the fact that you only have 50 people? So, that was a nightmare.
Yeah, sounds like it.
But and this is kind of where the game gets a little, or hence why they call it Frostpunk, is you can build these like automatons, like these giant like kind of walking like machines that will basically do the job of your people for you. And you can assign it to like an area, and it only takes one, but they require a lot of resources. And so you start to see there's a lot of this stuff. So there's the cold, and you always have to watch out for your temperature, and you always have to watch out for food. And in order to build and upgrade, you need wood and steel, so you have to be making that. And eventually they get to the point where they start to get a little social on you, and it's like some people want to leave because you're a shitty leader, and it's like, well, that's fair. I'm making children work. That's another thing. We'll talk about that in a bit. And so then there's like factions working against you, and you have to kind of either control them by building kind of like a police system with guard towers and watchtowers and prisons, or you can try to convert them into a more kind of peaceful coexisting religious group.
Okay.
And the neat thing they add to the side of that is you can basically enact like new laws and new things to do within the game. So like you start off with like just kind of a couple where it's like, oh, you can set certain buildings to work 24 hours instead of 12, but it makes people mad at you.
Okay.
And then it gets to crazy shit like, hmm, should children be working or like you know what I mean? Like it gets a little out there and like what happens if someone gets super sick and like they get something where they would need to be amputated?
Yeah.
Do you amputate them or do you put them in like a kind of longer living care? Amputation has the, you know, it gets them out of the hospitals faster, but the chances of them not being able to work because like, oh, I lost my leg, I can't work.
Whiners.
So yeah, a lot of the game has that tone, right? So like, a lot of the time the game's very much like y'all need to like do your shit, you little whiners. And then like sometimes I take a step back and like, oh god, what have I done? So if you're into city building games, kind of like Sim City, but you're on a clock
Sure.
and it's resource heavy, this game is super fun. It's $30 on Steam. I think it's technically early access, but if it is, it's a pretty solid full game for being that way, or being, or for I don't know. I don't know why it's priced at 30, but I'll tell you this: I'm having a lot of fun just like trying to get as far as I can and then realizing that I've screwed up somewhere and then my whole civilization just turning into just panic and chaos and all that good stuff.
Uh-huh.
So, if any of this sounded interesting, I think it's worth a grab.
Yeah. So does story mode eventually reveal what happened to the Earth to create this apocalypse?
If they do, it's not till later and or I skipped
Okay.
it.
I was just wondering if there's any like slow burn storytelling that was occurring.
A little bit, yeah. So the they kind of tell you that like all of a sudden things start getting really bad. Like the winners like at one point the winter doesn't stop and then it just gets progressively worse, and that's in the first little scenario, and then they move to the second scenario where you are basically humanity's last hope for plant life on the planet.
We've all
Like
been
you have
there,
all
right?
like the rest of the
We've
what
all been there, right?
right, and so you basically have to, on top of trying to handle your community, but you also have to handle these buildings that are carrying seeds and saplings and things like that.
Uh-huh.
But I haven't gotten to the third scenario yet. I actually, right before this podcast, I just finished day 20 of that one, and it was brutal. Like, everyone was fucked by the end of it.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah. So,
All right. Well, that was my
so a
only
little
question.
bit to answer your question.
I just like
Yeah.
games with like slow burn storytelling. So
Oh, hell
yeah.
yeah.
Does that mean it's time for the do 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 middle section? Ooh ooh middle section. Ooh ooh middle section. Disco jam middle section.
Very nice.
I was phoning it
Okay,
in.
don't beat yourself up too
I was
much.
phoning it in on that one, I think. So, anyways, hey, contact us at different things that Cody's
Yeah.
going to say right now.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to get at us on Twitter, that's Joe's territory. You can find us at fandomr_podcast. That's our Twitter handle. If you want to get in touch privately and not over the entire internet, I understand. You can still send us messages and emails at fanroulettepodcast@gmail.com.
Yes.
We are also on SoundCloud and iTunes, so if you search Fandom Roulette, we are there.
Yep.
Go do the sharing and the liking and all the fun stuff because we really appreciate it.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, and if you're looking for a place to either send people, if they're not necessarily SoundCloud or iTunes people, or you want to find more information about us, or send send personal questions and things like that, you can send them to www.fandomroulette.com.
Yeah.
some of the question, for a lot of the D&D section, we use questions that are given by the viewers or the listeners, and I've done whole one-shot episodes with other people's stuff. There's a little contact sheet at the bottom of the website that'll take you to us.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
good stuff.
Do all those things, please, because we are greatly appreciate
Middle
it.
section. Hey, look, it's a garbage kid. That vampire from like 5 episodes ago is delivering it to us.
Damn. I totally forgot about that whole vampire bit.
Yeah, it wasn't a good bit, but I never say that I let a Dover leave a bad bit behind.
Oh, God. Joe. So, for those of you wondering what the hell we're going on about, this is Garbage Kid, the section where we create fun characters for you to use in your D&D or your role-playing games in general. Uh-huh. And we use this lovely book called Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And I Cody? Know everything. Damn it. Joe, the worst.
Joe, you just talk too slow, my man. I'm just kidding.
Oh,
so anyway, God. Carry on.
So I made the character this week, and her name is River Rascal.
Nice. That's a good name.
Yeah. She is a female half-orc rogue.
Uh-huh. That's great.
Yeah.
We've never had one of those before.
No, definitely not. Not at all. Ruby knew who her parents were and was born at home. Ruby has 3 siblings and is the oldest of the collective.
Okay.
The Rascal family grew up with a single mother because their father was imprisoned for burglary.
That sucks.
Ruby, yeah, that's no bueno. Ruby grew up comfortably in a village out in the wilderness.
Okay, that adds up.
Yeah. Ruby had a few close friends and lived an ordinary childhood. So far, so good. But wait, there's more.
Oh no.
Ruby was always nimble and quick of wit. She decided to use those talents to help her make her way in the world. Ruby is 45 years old and has had quite a few life moments leading up to this adventure.
Tell me about them.
Yeah. Ruby never knew why, but she was exiled from her village and would spend a long time wandering through the wilderness.
Oh, poor girl.
Yeah. She would then make an enemy of an adventurer, which was not her fault.
Uh-huh.
So this adventurer was a dick. Later, she would meet someone important. I'm going to leave that up to you guys, because this is for you.
Uh-huh.
Ruby would go on an adventure and lose something of sentimental value to her along the way.
Oh no, what'd you lose?
That's for the audience to decide.
I need to know what River Rascal lost.
Ooh. I don't know. But anyways, after she came back to town, she would be committed of murder and was convicted and sentenced to a lifetime in prison until she escaped 4 years later.
God damn. How old is she?
45.
Oh, she's getting up there too, huh?
Yeah, and upon her escape, she became involved in a battle against another warring nation. And that, my friends, is where we leave River into your lovely hands.
That was a roller coaster ride.
It was.
But anyways.
Yeah.
So Cody.
So that was River Rascal, my garbage kid.
That was a good one. I liked that one. That was good. I appreciated that one very much so.
Yeah.
But anyways, what's next, Cody?
Well, normally after the garbage kid section, we like to talk about role-playing games, because that's pretty much all I do with my free time now.
That's fair.
And I had a question from a audience member. Jeff, thank you. I lost the actual question, so I'm paraphrasing a little bit. I want to start DMing. I have a game in mind that I'm not super familiar with. What are some tips to getting started / dealing with those first time jitters, being not confident in yourself.
Oh man, I relate to this question a lot.
How so? Tell me.
I mean, I've always thought about potentially DMing, but I always get afraid that there's a lot of moving pieces. So this is going to be as informative for me as it is for the audience, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things I can say. So I'm gonna just kind of go through like the ones that I think are important, and then over time, if this is your jam and you really like DMing, you're gonna kind of just start picking all this stuff up on your own. First off, if you're unfamiliar with the game that you're playing, I recommend you know reading over the books and looking for YouTube content of people playing the game. Honestly, before I started playing 5th edition, I watched several YouTube channels for a little bit, and I read the player's handbook cover to cover at least a couple times.
Uh-huh.
So, for if one of the big things, you feel more confident in yourself when you know the rules better. So I think one of the, and this might seem easy, but reading it and then rereading it and seeing how those apply. And I don't think you need to know and I'm going to be clear here. I don't think you need to know every rule in the book before you start playing. That's just a ridiculous clause.
Sure.
Like, there's no way.
I mean,
So,
there's plenty of times where we'll all have to like look into our various respective like books and things. So
right. And so I think the honest truth is I knew how to make a character.
okay,
I think that's important. Being able to help new players build characters.
Sure.
I wanted to get the base idea of how the game played. So for a lot of role playing games, a lot of people do this a little differently. But basically, the general, like if I were to tear down all of the mechanics and things, the base idea is you're playing with your friends. Your friends are trying to accomplish the tasks and obstacles that you've set ahead of them. So, learning how those play in, like, basically, I want to do a thing.
Sure.
Okay, I need you to roll dice or I need you to do this thing. And then we see whether or not you succeeded in doing that or failed. Basic, core mechanics of every RPG. I want to do the thing. The dungeon master or the game master basically sets, okay, you can do that, but you need to complete this thing. Usually that's die rolling. Not always, but typically die rolling.
Okay.
So knowing how to let people do that thing, being like, hey, I want to be able to do a thing.
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily need to know everything, but if you got the basics, like the core mechanics down, like, for instance, Blade in the Dark, I believe that's 2d6,
Yep.
right?
Or it depends on how many.
2d6 with some...
Depends on how many
Right.
how many dots you have by your skill.
Right. Baseline, roll some d6s. At a certain point, you succeed or fail the challenge. D&D, roll a d20. Add bonuses where applicable. You either fail or succeed. Knowing how that works in your game is going to easily put you in a leg up because, and I noticed this right away, sometimes people are going to ask, or this happens in every game, someone's going to throw you a curveball.
Sure.
It's just going to happen. There's no amount of prep to fix that thing. Someone's going to throw something at you that is either not in the book or something you haven't read. And I'm going to, the little behind the curtain, make it up. Use the mechanics you have on hand. Apply whatever stats and objects that you need, depending on the die, and just make it up.
Okay.
You determine how difficult it is, and then go on.
Is there like a guide at some point, though? Is there like a guide, though? I guess is my question.
Yeah, I think the more you play and the more you read those books and kind of explore, you'll eventually get the hang of the game on a level. And I think once you've gotten like the basics down, I think honestly the easiest thing at that point is to basically just tell your players like, hey, I am new. I am probably going to mess things up. That happens. I mean, shit, I've been DMing for a while now and I still screw things up.
Sure.
So my point of contention is hey, I'm going to be the last ruling on that thing. I'm going to say how that goes. And then if we find out later that that's not how, that wasn't the right call, or that wasn't, the rules or whatever, shit, man, I'm sorry. I'll just, we'll know for next time.
Sure.
And the more you play, the more, the more comfortable you get. Honestly, it's the scariest part or the hardest part is taking that first step, that plunge into DM hood. But I'll tell you what, it's the most fun I've had in a really long time is being the DM.
Okay.
So honestly, it's just being like, hey, and a lot of times, one of two things will happen. You either have a bunch of people who've never played a role playing game before, or maybe they're not familiar with the system you're playing. Well, that's great. You just make shit up and you just kind of go with the punches. You just tell people, like, that's how I'm going to rule it. Be, part of the game master role is to be the judge.
Sure.
You're the rule guy. You're, at some point, some people might not agree with you, but hey, you're the final say in what happens. So just go with it. I mean, don't be a dick about it, of course, but to keep the game moving. If you need to go and later look on the internet or look in the book to find exactly what happened, like, sure, that's fine, but just keep the game moving. It's not I know for me as a player, if sometimes I'll take back things that I do if it means like we have to sit and look through like 5 different books to get the right idea. So honestly, just be the rule guy that you're supposed to be, and just give a judgment call. I'm pretty sure most people you play with aren't going to mind. And then secondly, you'll run into people who've played the game already, which is great because then they can just tell you how things work. If, and you can tell them like, hey, if I say something that doesn't necessarily line up, let me know. And, I can rule it based on the actual rules because you guys know it already. And I'm pretty sure a player who has that knowledge is going to be more than happy to help out a new DM.
Sounds great. So, okay, I have 2 quick questions for you.
Yeah, what's up?
So, question, or rather, I have a question, and then I would have a piece of advice that I was given by my friend who DM'd, who was kind of gently guiding me to DMing a little while ago.
Hell yeah.
Which, one of them was, so the piece of advice was, don't get too bogged down in the NPCs you love, because there's a good chance that your players won't love them as much as you do.
Oh, for sure. That's great, yes. Don't spend a whole lot of time on the NPCs you create, because in most cases, they will die. Or they will get fucked over. No, that's a great piece of advice.
And then, so my question for you, Cody, is like, so when you, like, let's say you're introducing an NPC,
okay.
do you roll up like a whole character for that NPC, or like do you roll up the like most important stats? So like, let's say you were to introduce a bard character, would you basically just roll to give them a charisma modifier, or would you roll a whole 100% character?
Oh, gross. The idea of building a whole new character for an NPC sounds like a nightmare. Sounds like a lot to do. Honestly, I give them whatever I think I need. So in the case of your example, a bard, I just give them a base charisma bonus. Like, you can even see this if you look in the monster manual of Dungeons and Dragons. You will find that a lot of things, are either baseline or like increased based on like the type of person. So like, for instance, a noble has higher, I think it's intellect and charisma.
Okay.
And that's really all they show you, like, in terms of like bonuses and things like that. And then like how they'd handle in combat, because let's be real, in most cases Dungeons and Dragons turns into combat. So even the monster manual just has like base stats if it's applicable, and then things that you do in battle.
Okay.
So for me, in the bard example, maybe I give them some spells that they might use, or give them charisma. But oftentimes or not, I'll just go to the Dungeon Master's Guide or the Monster Manual and pick something that's already there.
Okay.
and just kind of give them the flair that they need to give them the things that I want them to do.
Sounds good. All right. Yeah, those are my two big questions about DMing because like
Yeah,
that whole
yeah.
concept of introducing a bunch of NPCs is, I think, maybe one of the things that keeps me the most terrified. I can come up with pretty effective worlds, I feel, but just like populating those worlds with people sounds kind of crazy. So,
Well, I'll give you a another piece. This is extra
oh,
piece of
cool,
advice.
cool.
I always have a list of random NPC names in case I didn't create enough people.
All right.
So oftentimes, what'll happen is I'll create the kind of, in the case of what I'm doing over the weekend, they're in a town filled to the brim with
Uh
people,
huh.
and shit, I'm not gonna fill the entire town with people. I might do the king and queen because they're directly talking with them, but oftentimes I'll just be like, all right, I'm gonna pick a random name, and then maybe if I feel like it, I'll roll a d100 to pick like the fantasy race that they are, and honestly, just kind of going from there. Just having like a list of names is so good for a session where people are going to be like, because you never know when a character is going to be like, well, hey, what's that guard's name that we just talked to? You know what I mean?
Uh, yeah, yeah. Okay. And I'm the biggest offender of that. I know. Uh, uh.
So
So
yeah,
yeah, that's some good advice, Cody. Thank you for that.
yeah. So moving on, because we're getting we're getting pretty close to the end of this
Yes,
bad
we
boy.
are. So yeah. So I guess I will give a kind of blanket statement. So a lot of the things that we enjoy, we are either in the midst of or they're in the midst of in terms of like seasons and of television and things like that. Uh, so like for grab bag, we might start dipping back into like old school things from the past and like giving maybe fresh takes or fresh perspectives or things like that, or just talking about them. Um, and so recently, my family got a Hulu subscription, and I was kind of like,
Hell
I was kind of
yeah.
like milling about on Hulu. I noticed that The Matrix was on there streaming, and I was like, dang, it's been a really long time since I watched The Matrix. So I decided to watch The Matrix, and yeah, let's want to talk about The Matrix.
Hell
So yeah,
yeah.
so The Matrix is a film by the Wachowskis, which is a sibling duo pair of writers directors from Chicago, and is kind of the uh, it's arguably one of the most popular and influential pieces of cyberpunk that's ever been made. And then I would also argue that it might be one of the most like important films of like like a kind of it was a redefining film in a lot of ways. I think. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's the Matrix was what's the word I'm looking for? I think it popularized the kind of bullet time slow mo fight scenes. Like everything was like, as far as I'm aware, things were choreographed. Like those fights looked like super legitimate. And oh god, that movie takes me
I know,
back,
right?
man. I couldn't watch that when that came out in I think believe it was
Something
1999.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't actually watch it because it was rated
Ooh,
R,
me
and
perhaps.
I was yeah. So like I was a little boy, and when I saw it, I was like, oh, that was the movie that, no joke, was like, when I was a kid, I was like, man, like I don't really care for R-rated movies or whatever, but like I want to see The Matrix so bad. It was The Matrix and Aliens that I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
watch. And fun fact, I don't think I ever got to watch Aliens.
Yeah, and, it's interesting. A similar thing where um, I really wanted to watch The Matrix bad, and then my dad like read about it and he looked it up on the uh, new confangled internet and found out that it like I don't understand. Like, do you remember why it got an R rating? Is it just that it
I
was very
believe it
violent?
was.
because
Yeah,
there's
I think it was just violent,
very
and
little
I think there
else.
was a couple of. Well, there's that scene at the very beginning where Neo, before he figures everything out, he goes to like a club.
Uh,
And I believe if you're looking hard enough, you can see some questionable material
Fair
there.
enough. But like, yeah, like I
But
think my dad was just looking to see like it wasn't just like swearing every 2 seconds and like lots and lots of blood splatters and things like that. But he deemed it was okay, so we watched it together. And yeah, that movie like just it blew my mind. But yeah, I think what I'm trying to say when I say it's like kind of like a paradigm shift of a movie is the fact that you mentioned bullet time. That kind of like invented that thing. And for a while, everyone was doing bullet time. Like everyone was trying to ape that style of the Matrix so bad. But a thing that I noticed this time as I was watching it, and I had listened to um, some people talk about the Matrix, uh, is the fact that everything kind of has like a green tint when you're in the Matrix. Have you noticed that?
yeah, you know what? It's been a while. So like you just recently
Yeah,
watched it. I still have the kind of rose tinted glasses version of
sure.
it.
I mean,
But yes, I do.
oh, good.
Go on.
I'll say this: it holds up, man. It is still a very very good movie. Um,
I'm so happy about that. Like I was a little nervous when you wanted to talk about this that it might not, still hold up to today. But I mean, shit, man, the whole bullet time thing. Everyone does that. I mean, the most recent example I can think of is they do like a silly version of it in
well,
Deadpool.
that's the thing, right? Is it's kind of been parodied quite a lot as well. But yeah, um,
Yeah, I mean, we've hit the point where everyone has pretty much done everything you can do with bullet
mhm.
time.
I mean, it was parodied by
Or
Shrek
just
like
the.
2 years later.
Oh,
Where Princess Fiona's fighting
God.
the Robin Hood men, which Shrek is on Netflix, so I watched that movie and I still enjoyed it. Um, talking about blasting the past movies, this is a twofer.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I just think that it was this just really cool idea that two incredibly ambitious filmmakers were trusted enough to take on and tackle, and just the fact that it was two filmmakers who had already had just had one film before this one, which is crazy, and basically like just kind of reinvented a lot of things that we might take for granted today in our today's action cinema. So yeah,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, shit, man. I think. Now, I don't know if this is actually true, but like in my personal opinion, like I feel like this really. Like this and several other movies really brought like kind of that gritty, dirty sci-fi that we just didn't get a lot of.
yes, um,
I think that was another big explosion, just like you said, like cyberpunk. I don't know if that's, but like the whole like the fact that in this movie, and this is spoilers for a movie that came out in
mhm,
1999, so I guess spoiler tag. A shit ton of the main cast, like the good guys, get fucking iced
that's
like
true.
halfway through the
Yeah,
movie.
it's
And I'll tell you what, even as like, because I think I watched it like as I think I was like 16, 17 when I actually was able to. Sorry, mom. When I actually watched it, fucking the scene where Mouse goes down, like still tears me up a little. Like just fucking getting mowed down by the SWAT team in the
and he,
hotel.
and he has
Ugh.
those two like crazy arm.
Doesn't he just have two Tommy guns that he's
Yeah,
holding?
but just the design of them.
Yeah, like they
They
definitely.
wrapped all the way
Oh
around his
God.
arm. But so it's funny that you should mention that because I see right here. I'm looking at some stuff about it. Apparently, they designed their ship, the Nebuchadnezzar, to have a kind of like patched up look where because they wanted to draw a contrast to like the more clean sci-fi like ships were like like in Star Trek the spaceships are all very very sleek and like well maintained and things like that. Like they wanted you to see the wires and they wanted you to make it feel like it was a bunch of you know different parts scrapped together and things like that. Um, and I think that the gritty aesthetic really works well for the movie in the real world, especially when you contrast it to just how slick and cool everything looks inside of the Matrix.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think it really hits at home, especially when because I don't think you see the real world until about about a quarter way, a little past
Yeah,
that
a little
through
bit past that,
when yeah, but oh man, this is giving me some feels. I might if I have time tomorrow, I might fucking pop this in and
right?
watch it
I,
because
I would say it's worth a watch.
um
It really holds up for me. It also has a really good villain in Hugo Weaving as Agent Smith. He has just this like weird way of talking that just like makes him feel like he is a thing attempting to be human.
oh for sure we're talking about Agent Smith,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Agent Smith.
Oh my god, yes. There's this like almost robotic like there is no slang, shorthand, like everything is is like somebody typed it into a computer and it's like I understand people now. Like oh, it's so good, especially his little bit when he's talking to Morpheus about how he wants to get out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
it's really cool, because I've just been I don't know I've been fascinated lately about sci-fi where you have characters that are trying to attempt to be human, and just the ways that different actors are able to achieve this like human but not quite human thing. So like obviously like a big one that comes to mind is Leonard Nimoy where he's just standing there stoic faced and emotionless. You have from Deep Space Nine, the character of Odo who is this like humanoid who doesn't really like humanity all that much, and yet he still has a human form, or bipedal form, but he like walks with this like weird kind of he just walks so bizarrely where it's like it's a person who's kind of observed walking but doesn't quite understand why walking happens. And then in this one you have Hugo Weaving playing Agent Smith, who is like they're going to respond to something that appears human, but like you said, it's all very like no contractions or slangs or anything like that. Like everything he says is more or less straightforward.
Yeah, he's basically a walking dictionary at points.
Uh-huh.
But shit, man, those fight scenes, they're so especially and I think one of the other reasons that like in my head this movie is just so choice is that scene like and everyone knows that if you've seen the Matrix you know where I'm going. It's the scene where he enters the bottom of the building
Mm-hmm.
and he's got his black trench coat and he's literally got a million guns underneath his fucking trench coat and he walks through the gun detector
You know,
or the gun detector. It only detects guns and he just shows the cop like
uh-huh.
all that
You
shit
know what that
and then that whole scene plays out like oh god that's so good.
that could have you know gone for his that R rating maybe.
Yeah, there was a lot of bullets in that scene but yeah the fight scene in the hallway with all the pillars like that's been taken and parodied and tried to be recreated like oh that scene's so good like maybe the first of its kind question mark but
I can't say
oh
for sure,
so
but it's
good.
definitely one that left the biggest impact. So all right, well, shall we finish up?
Yeah, well I'm gonna ask you
Oh,
a
okay,
question.
cool,
Favorite character?
cool. Ooh, that's a rough one. Tank.
Hell yeah, that's
I
a
think
good
it's
one. I
Tank.
like that.
Yeah, I would say Tank.
Yeah.
I just like the fact that he's he can't enter the Matrix, and yet he is still like a really integral and important member of that team because without Tank they're not getting in and out. So he keeps that ship afloat, and I've always been fond of pilot characters. I think. What about you?
That's tough because I think as a whole, besides like maybe a few of the side characters they don't get deep enough into, I like all the characters.
Uh,
But honestly, I think Mouse was my jam, man. I was so bummed.
Yeah, it was a bummer.
And he's like the techie nerd of the group, which has always kind of been my jam. And then he gets fucking iced. Like, ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. So if you have a Hulu account or you have it on DVD, I would say give it a watch. I say it holds up quite well, but you know, your mileage may vary. I just think that it's still a fantastic movie and a really just revolutionary movie in general. They do some stuff that is really very cool to watch. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah. If the story doesn't grab you, I'm sure the action will.
Yeah.
Of course, and I have to say this, I don't know if I ever want to watch the second or third.
You know what? I'm actually gonna give them a chance.
Okay. Because you haven't seen the last one.
I never
right?
saw the third one. I was so disappointed as a child in the second one. And, you know, I don't think I was still quite old enough to see R-rated movies in theaters when the third one came out yet. Although, what year did the third one come out? I don't even remember. But I had just heard so many things about the third one where I was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to go see this. But I'm curious. I'd like to give him a shot, see what I think. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm definitely gonna watch. You know what? We're gonna circle back to
All
this.
Right, yeah.
You watch those two and see how they hold up now, because I'll tell you what, if they didn't hold up when I was a kid, they probably didn't hold up so well as an adult.
That's fair, but who knows? Right.
However, I do want to see the first one to see if I still have that, like, you know, if the rose tinted glasses haven't shrouded my my opinion on it.
Right. But yeah, if you have a Hulu account or have it on DVD, go check it out. I would be curious to hear what you think.
Yeah.
All right, but yeah, so I think it's time we wrap it up there, Cody. Thank you so much for once again listening to an episode of Fandom Roulette. It's always a pleasure to record this and things like that. Yeah, signing off. This is Joe.
And I'm Cody.
And as always, stay nerdy.
Stay super nerdy.